So today we have Liz Stefan. Am I pronouncing that correct, Stefan?
Stefan, but it's fine either way.
Okay, yeah, and here with us from Nifty Learning, and also the host of the L&D Spotlight podcast, which looks like a great podcast. I listened to a few parts of a few episodes over the last few days just to get a feel for what you're doing, and it's a fantastic podcast. Congrats on that. And we have lots of questions loaded up in our Q&A area to ask Liz about. So Liz is co-founder, and is it CEO of Nifty Learning?
Yes.
Co-founder and CEO. Nifty Learning has been around since what, 2017, 2016?
Well, it depends how you count it. Stealth mode about 2 years, but more significantly, let's say 2019.
Okay. That works. Curious about the name though, Nifty Learning. Where did that go? Nifty is yeah. How did you come up with that name?
So this is probably the first question a lot of people have asked. I'm not a native English speaker, but I did learn it passionately, and I'm more of an old-fashioned kind of person, and I know that nifty is a kind of old-timey sort of word. The way I describe it to people, or what it's supposed to signify, is I want people to think of our platform kind of like a grandpa would look at the phone and a smartphone and would be like, hey, this is pretty nifty. It does all of these things. I can speak to my grandkids. I can take photos. I can do so many things, shopping list, and so, so this is kind of the spirit of the naming. The point being that I want us to be flexible and to service as many people as possible in the best way possible.
That's fantastic. I have some questions that are related to that, and everyone, if you have any questions for Liz during this conversation, feel free to add them to the QA section. You should see a little box with a little dialogue box with a question mark in it. If you jump in there, you can see the questions that I've already come up with for Liz, and we're just going to start getting into this now because we have about 30 minutes and I don't know, about 10 questions or so. So Liz, I know that you work for Xerox, and then you also you were working for an IT company for a while. But what inspired you to become a learning professional, and how did you get started in the field?
So I actually studied architecture. I have a master's in architecture and urban planning, and I did not plan to end up in learning and development. It was more of an accident. When Xerox was recruiting, they were looking for German speakers for something in whatever BPO thing they were doing. I applied because they told us they would send us to Barcelona for 2 weeks for training. So for me, that was amazing as a fresh graduate. And I didn't have any plans to actually be an architect at that point in time. And it so happened then when they recruited me, they also looked at my voluntary experience, and I actually was part of an educational NGO with a focus on STEM students. And I had done learning and development during my studies, but I didn't know it. We were creating basically courses for STEM students on various topics, working together with the technical university. They saw that, they said, I think you're better suited in training and development. I said, sure, why not? I was very excited, but also very scared to be instantly thrown into very complex learning and development processes for a professional services company in the UK, one of the big four. My first question was, how am I going to teach people how to do all of these processes if I've never learned the art myself? And they said, you'll be fine if you'll figure it out. And I immediately started doing what I now know is instructional design, the training delivery, facilitation, and also doing a part of performance management, which is checking for knowledge retention and effectiveness of the training delivered. And that happened. I did that for about a year, and then my career started expanding.
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a guest here, one, that went from studying architecture and then going to instructional design. That one is really unique. And then also it amazes me how many times I've heard that, where people are doing the work of an instructional designer and don't even realize it until later, until they've actually gotten, a lot of experience doing the work, and they're like, oh wait, this is actually a career called instructional design. So that's pretty interesting. Before you started out in L&D, like if you could go back to yourself and have a conversation, what do you wish you had known before you started out? Is there anything you would have liked to have told yourself?
I think because I was fresh out of university, I had the same sort of impression that if it looks like school, that's what learning must be in your professional life. And I've discovered, meanwhile, after being in this space for, I guess, 11 years now, that it's not that. And if you really want to have a strong focus on learning transfer, retention, application and practice of all the knowledge that people acquire, you have to know some things, maybe about neuroscience, maybe about behavior adoption, maybe about business objectives and what businesses actually hope to achieve through their learning strategy. So maybe understanding a little bit more the positioning of a learning and development professional, and what specifically what goals they should have. That would have been cool to have like a crash course in. You're here because you need to deliver this and this business goals, not particularly because you're supposed to design a pretty PowerPoint or anything like that.
Oh.
Another thing is maybe even maybe I would have liked to understand more about adult learning principles. So during our universities, we actually had the option to specialize in, ironically, in pedagogy. But the way it was taught in university, it was very children focused. So there was no notion of how to teach for adults. I did get the certificate in training from the European Union, but it was like a 3-day thing. So I didn't actually have proper concepts of why adults acquire knowledge, what they do with it, motivation, attention, and so on. So that might have been also very good to know more about how people learn, why they do it, and how it happens in a workplace context.
How did you gain that knowledge afterwards? Where did you gain that knowledge about, like,
trial and error, quite frankly. So it was a crash course in learning how to teach my peers, basically. Some of those people were actually much older than me when they were getting hired and doing the work. So it was just empirical, figuring it out while doing it. But and this is also something that led to the podcast existing, L&D Spotlight. One of the main reasons I started it is because I realized how little I knew about learning and development. And I wanted to get to as many sort of experts or people who have some battle scars, and I want them to tell me what it was like, what they learned, how they succeeded, what they failed at, and so on, because I think this is the most I guess one of the most effective ways that I learn. I want to hear how it was for you, and I want to try to contextualize that for myself so that I can actually get the good practice examples, stay away from the bad things and so on, not make the same mistakes and so on.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that question, like why did you start your podcast? But you just answered it, and that is actually a great reason to start a podcast. I mean, I've told people before, if you want to learn more about L&D or just like network or do anything like that, just starting a podcast is a great way to do it. I mean, heck, start another TLDC or start a community, and you'll end up connecting with lots of people out there and learn more about this industry, this space. But of course, you have to have the time and the energy to be able to do all of that stuff, which isn't exactly easy to come by nowadays. So now that you're the CEO of your company, Nifty Learning has been around for a little while. From what you've seen, what are some of the most important qualities of what you think a successful L&D professional or instructional designer should be? And the reason I'm asking that too is I'm fascinated by your background, because I see, you've done some business development, you do strategy, you have like kind of an operational mindset. Some of these things are not, I don't see, they're not typical like that I've seen. So I'd like to hear what your answer would be. Important qualities of a successful L&D professional.
I really appreciate that you are asking this question. And I do realize that I'm a little bit on the outside, right? Because we are a vendor in this space. So it's not necessarily our place to preach, or what we say or I say doesn't, it can easily be disregarded because maybe this person is trying to sell me something. That being said, I will, however, express this, and maybe some things might be a bit harsh. Myself and the team, we've spoken already to probably hundreds of learning and development professionals, and everybody kind of sits on a spectrum, right? So you have the people who are so far ahead, and they have so much space in the budget and in the way that their leadership team has understood the purpose of L&D, that they can experiment, they can do a lot of really cool things. They can work with BI, they can look at data, they have the flexibility to implement AI, they can do magic, basically. They can build a spaceship, right? And you have people on the other end of the spectrum who, for various reasons, cannot or would not go outside of the, let's say, standard or basics of what we think of when we think about learning, right? So just counting number of hours of learning per year and being happy that this is the metric that they have to deliver to leadership, and that's it. And I personally think that in whatever situation you are, you should always question what value you're adding as an L&D professional, because your purpose and the purpose of the business function itself is to serve, but to serve redundantly, purposefully, right? So you can't just be there because you're the person who organizes training, who does the scheduling, who does the compliance reports, and that's it. It's sort of like a little mouse. Just, I've done all my scheduling for this week, I'm done, that's it. If you're there as a learning and development professional who's supposed to move the business forward, you're supposed to understand what that means. So having business acumen, understanding at least the basics of the industry that you're operating in, understanding what business growth means, and figuring out to the level of KPIs, understanding what are the KPIs that you as an L&D professional should be influencing. There are number of hours per learning per year, per employee per year, are not, in my opinion, a business KPI. Well, actually, not even in my opinion. They're not a business KPI. They're an L&D KPI, and it sometimes feels good to say that we've increased this number, but it doesn't actually prove that you've added value to the business.
Nice. And I think it's really interesting because on Monday, I think you saw a little bit of Ian Crook's episode where I think that was the gist of sort of what he's saying is kind of with his operational mindset, bringing value to the business. That is something that all, instructional designers and L&D professionals should keep that like as one of the top priorities. And if you're not, then you're basically not doing your job right. So, with that, how about this question? How do your skills in business process automation, business strategy, business development, operations management, how has that helped you as an L&D professional? Why are those things important?
So I have a couple of components or ways of answering this question. One of them is I think I have formed a habit of working back from the objective. And I like that. And I like to believe that L&D professionals are also working as an industry towards that goal, right? You need to figure out what is the thing that you're going to impact and work back from that. Always have objectives in mind. And if it's not in the scope of L&D, just don't do it. Politely decline, whatever. Explain why. Argue your case as best possible, but don't just deliver training because someone is asking you to. You need to understand, they need to understand whether that training would be the thing that adds value, because sometimes maybe those people are better left in production. They're probably making more money for the company just being left to do their work, shoddy as it is, or whatever thing you thought you were going to improve with that training. So one thing is just focusing on the objectives and working back from that. Another thing is, especially the larger the company, I think there's a matter of efficiency of scale. If your technology, your processes, the way you're doing things is sort of hindering you, or it's making it hard for you to focus on the objectives. And one very, very basic example is if you're stuck scheduling training, just like talking to trainers, replacing people in the session, going back and forth, issuing certificates, whatever. Some companies, a lot of companies still do this quite manually. If you're stuck doing essentially admin work, there's very little space in your mind and in your schedule as an L&D professional to do value-adding work, which is analysis of training needs, consultancy work, understanding the business, coming up with new things, cleaning up the catalog. My God, cleaning up the catalog is not done frequently or big enough, at a big enough scale. Another thing is stakeholder management. I think that L&D as a sub-function of HR historically has not self-advocated very well. It's hard for L&D people to, again, my opinion, and this is the thing that I've observed from speaking to L&D professionals. A lot of L&D professionals find it hard to prove value from where they're sitting in that context, in that situation, and argue for better investment or reallocation of resources or experimenting, because it's hard to get out of your like tiny paradigm of I'm delivering courses, library, training, whatever, and thinking about impact and arguing that case and presenting it in a way that the business understands it, not in the way that you as an L&D professional think about it. And I have also, for example, I've just recently, I spoke to someone, we also do consultancy while we're building the platform. And more often than not, we tell people that maybe they're not ready for this or that type of technology, or it's not worth investing in it because they have bigger problems to fix. For example, one of our customers who actually just bought the platform in December, we showed them a cute mock-up that we have for social learning, LXP, user-generated content, and so on. This is one of the directions that we want to go into. And they said, oh, immediately, sure, when is it going to be live? I want this. And I asked them, why do you want it? Well, because we want our people to start creating content and job aids and so on. And I said, you don't need technology for that first. You need something that relates to culture. Why don't you test it out first? Why don't you see if one team has this behavior already? If not, try to encourage it. You can do this without any technology. Try to encourage it and see if it sticks. See if you're the kind of organization that could potentially become, user-generated, content-driven, review, rate, debate, and so on. If you're not that kind of organization, you don't need to spend money on I don't know what kind of fascinating LXP. You're probably not going to use most of it, and you're going to be paying for 2 years, however long that contract is. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of prioritizing the things that you need to solve for and working on the, I guess, harder problems more intently, right?
Very interesting. Now I'm are you going to be at any are you going to be at any of the expos coming up, like at ATD or at DevLearn or anything like that?
I just came back from Learning Technologies in London. I don't know, but I will see.
Nice. I got to read some of these comments that were coming through. Mac was saying, well said, Liz. We believe that just ticking boxes when it comes to L&D is suicide for the people of the organization and eventually the organization itself. Julia had said, service-minded leadership, thanks Liz, versus the notorious pencil whipping have been trudging uphill against the bare minimum mentality for a while. Incremental progress only very recently. Cindy says we share a similar philosophy with L&D's corporate value. Let's see, Mac followed up here. Agreed, we need to get the business to help us help them bring in the rod from cradle to grave. Do you know Mac? You must know Mac. Julia says, definitely agree. Training for the sake of placating an HR checklist is not servicing the company or agency. Here we can deal with regulatory requirements that have made training on a product a certification requirement. So far, needs analysis has been negated before I finish saying the 2 words. Wow, Julia.
Ouch.
Benny's saying that's very important. Choose and use tech to super boost already existing behaviors. Fantastic comments all around. Thanks, everybody. No, this is great. So let me ask you. We're getting on time, so I'm going to ask you a few more questions. I'm interested in Nifty Learning. So when was it that you decided to start the company? And I guess you have a platform. I didn't know that. I suspect, it's great that you're mentioning that you're a vendor and stuff, and sort of being transparent about that. But why did you decide to do that? You were at Xerox for a number of years, and then was it like there that you said, look at the landscape of things, there needs to be this solution? Or how did Nifty Learning come about?
So ironically, I did not look at the landscape of things, but it worked out in the end. So we founded Nifty on the day that I quit my job at Xerox. And the story is kind of like this. I initially wanted it. So Xerox had a very, it's called Conduent now, has a large division that just does managed learning services. And I was part of that division. At some point, I was a learning solution specialist. I was designing processes for pharma and aerospace and professional services customers, Fortune 500 and so on. The work was being done very manually. And I said, this is very frustrating. It takes a lot of people too much time to just book stuff in the calendar. Little did I know it wasn't a matter of there are no LMSs out there. It was a matter of giant corporations move slowly with tech acquisitions. So I said, we need to build something that helps us as Xerox be more efficient in the way we service our customers. And that was an LAS, a learning administration system. I proposed this to the management. I told them, give me X amount of money, 6 months, I will build a solution that you can replicate and resell to all your customers. It was met with, we already dumped quite a good chunk of money into this and that solution, and the implementations were like a year and a half in and not yet finished. And they said, we are definitely never going to start building something internally and doing this when we are so close to making it. Ironically, even after I left years later, they still had not finished the implementation with the giant provider. And the prototype for Nifty was a dashboard. We called it the Eric report. It was my biggest customer then. It was basically a dashboard form of 27 filters that would show you all the learning requests happening and moving through the pipeline in real time, with budgets, with tasks, with blockers, with timing, with SLAs, and so on. And I was frustrated because they wouldn't let me do it. I was very naive back then. I didn't realize that you can't just do entrepreneurship. You have to have the blessings of all the forefathers of the business. And I said, okay, fine, I'll just go build it myself. And on the day that I quit, I attended a startup event and I said, hi, my name is Liz and I just quit my job. I want to build a solution for this industry. No good deed goes unpunished. Thank you, Julia. Indeed.
That's a great story, Liz. That's pretty impressive. That's really impressive.
It was very impactful. We started a job on, but I was sort of sneakily going into IT because I wanted to learn how to build a software product. And that's why I say we were in stealth mode for a couple of years. After doing it, after validating, including one of Xerox's customer, we did like a smoke test, and we asked people, hey, we have this new LMS, you want to book a demo? And one of Xerox's customers, who was one of my customers, booked a demo. And I told him, we actually don't have anything, but why did you book? And he said, well, even with outsourcing and the LMSs and all the solutions that we have in place, work is still too heavy, and it can be streamlined further, and we would be interested in a solution. And I was pleasantly surprised because that was a form of initial validation, and then we've never looked back since.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We discovered actually that just after deciding that this is the thing we want to do for the foreseeable future, we discovered that there are actually 1,000 LMS solutions out there. So we need to figure out the more painful aspects of the LMS user. And when I say user, I don't mean learner. I mean the learning and development team. And we discovered that even though on the learner's side, the best, let's say 20, 50 LMSs are pretty comparable, On the admin side, they are not. And actually, they're very, very poor because everybody's been building with the learner in mind. But to service the people who unlock the learning for the organization, this is something that not too many people had thought about. And we said, okay, not only are we going to build a learner-facing experience that's absolutely decent and on par with everybody, but we want to make it easy for the L&D professional to just like have order in their thinking, in the learning plan, in the intentions, in the strategy, and so on. And this is what we've been striving to do, and we have been doing ever since.
Very interesting. Huh. Well, it definitely intrigues me now. I'm going to have to take a look. I didn't realize going to your website that you actually had a platform. So that's interesting. And yeah, and so we'll get the word out there. Now, I do also want to just talk a little bit, and I've got to wrap it up pretty soon here, but your L&D Spotlight podcast, I've learned it. It sounds, it seems it's a very kind of genuine sounding podcast. It seems, authentic, and the notes that you provide are really, really wonderful on that. What are some things that you've learned from your guests on that Spotlight podcast? Because that's kind of was your intention. I saw you had Clark Quinn on there, who I know, and some other guests. What are things you've learned by hosting that podcast?
So funny that you mentioned it. So Clark Quinn, he's the one who gave me a phrase that I keep repeating whenever I have a conversation about L&D being focused on measurement. He says that L&D has been a faith-based industry for, well, basically since the beginning, right? Because we defaulted to training. Then the LMS came up, and then we were like, nobody go to classroom anymore. Let's just shove stuff online, right? And for the past, however, 20 years, we've been in this situation where most companies either deliver one-off stuff or they do online. And now more recently we do blended, and now we have LXP, the Netflix of learning, and so on, and whatever. And now AI, obviously. There's only so much that the brain can actually take for learning to be effective and to not have been a waste. I think a lot of the most, I guess, surprising and refreshingly surprising thing that I learned is that you can't force this massive chunk of information and learning that learners receive all the time. Just force it because you have the technology and you have the intention and the strategy. You can't go around the fact that humans learn at the speed of human, right? There's neuroscience that tells us about neuroplasticity. There's behavior adoption and the fact that the behavior isn't just like acquired in however many days, like Charles Duhigg says, right? It's behavior is a thing that you work over time to change, and then you just have to maintain it, and so many other things. And I actually have a lot more episodes about the I guess the learning, the action of learning itself, right? The retention, the transfer, the application, the measurement of application, and so on. These are not details, these are very essential components of workplace learning effectiveness. And these are the things that an L&D professional, in my opinion, should think about whenever they strategize, whenever they start planning, whenever they start throwing budgets at things. It was so eye-opening, and I didn't realize how much complexity there actually is in the act of learning, and how little, unfortunately, is being minded when many companies plan their learning, like their yearly learning plan or whatever. It's unfortunate, and I really want us to, as an industry, to start thinking about the human who's both doing the work and needs to acquire knowledge to do the work. The human is the essential component. You simply can't think of people as numbers, like content libraries, throw them in training, whatever, and expect results. You have to consider the individual every single time. And unfortunately, it's very effort intensive. But the companies, and there's a McKinsey article that's really interesting about this, that says that companies that invest not just in profit, but people and profit, and they do it religiously, actually have, I don't know how much more, like twice in sales or something. It's because if you focus on the human, on their skills, their comfort, their psychological safety, the timeliness of learning, and so on. If you focus on these people and you treat them right, because corporate culture is nasty, then they will produce results. But you have to do the work. You have to invest the energy to do it properly.
Wow, that's wonderful. Liz, I am so glad that we're getting to talk to you because, especially as a founder and CEO of an organization like yours, it's good to get, like, I think, your perspective on things and hear about what your focuses are. And I have one last question for you that Veni just submitted, and I think you're definitely qualified to answer this one. I'm really interested to hear your reply. What do you think is the number one problem that L&D should solve?
Hi, Benny. So happy to see you here. I can't pick one. Can I pick two?
Sure. So, go for two.
I'm gonna say I think that there are two things. I guess the problem that they should be solving is positioning. And in positioning, I'm going to put what's my purpose as an L&D, how do I measure impact, how do I engage stakeholders, and so on. The way I present myself, the way I handle change management, just positioning, right? It's very, very important to understand if you have a seat at the table, if not, what you need to get, what do you need to do to get there, how to argue your case better, and so on. So I guess positioning. What I would like us as an industry to solve for, and this is my, if you will, my personal goal, I'm trying to figure out if you can even mathematically, no, scientifically prove ROI of learning. So if I say I input this much, I guess, budget, energy, time, resources, whatever, into my people, do I get this much more output, profit, business growth, sales, customer satisfaction, product quality, whatever. This is, I think, something that in any case we're all striving for as an industry, and I'm seeing really good signs. I think AI is going to be a big unlocking factor, let's say. But for the individual, I think it's a matter, for the individual and the professional, I think it's a matter of positioning, understanding where you are, planning for where you want to get, and having a tactical approach.
Nice. Excellent. Wow, this is great stuff. Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your support with TLDC and being part of the membership. It's really, really kind of an honor to have you within the community. You had some brilliant insights, and I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation so more folks will get to know you. So I'll be formatting this video, be releasing it to everybody out on YouTube and everywhere. And then also the podcast version will go out, and I get a surprisingly high number of downloads for the podcast. So we'll spread the word about Liz and Nifty Learning and the L&D Spotlight podcast. I did see, I think Julia had posted the link to the podcast. Yeah. In chat, yeah, niftylearning.io/spotlight-podcast. And yes, there you go. Julia's wrapping it up with boom. ROI is the key for L&D survival in the corporate ocean. Agreed. All right.
May I add a closing?
Sure.
So I just wanted to praise you for the work that you're doing, and I think I didn't touch on it earlier, but I wanted to get to this point. I think we underestimate as an industry, but also in the way we strategize L&D, right? I think L&D people underestimate the power of learning from peers. It's so organic that it almost goes unnoticed, right? But this is probably the most impactful way you learn, because it's a combination of on the job, asking for feedback, feeling a bit of support from someone who's giving you advice, teaching others. It's basically the cream, right, of effectiveness of learning. And I think this is the kind of thing that L&D people can figure out ways to encourage more of, become some sort of networker, some sort of connector between people who share interests or have questions or have doubts, experts and juniors, thought leaders and people who don't know anything about the topic and so on. I think it's such a, L&D is positioned in such a beautiful place that they have the key to unlocking community learning. And I really appreciate the fact that there are communities focused on learning, because I think the best way for us as an industry to grow is also to learn from each other, from practical examples, from, you know, battle scars, and trying to do better every day with encouragement from peers. So I congratulate you for that.
Thank you, Liz. No, and it's totally true. Every single person that I talk to, the stories are always fantastic. And more than anything, what I also love is I getting to understand L&D culture better, like maybe more so than anybody, like because there is a culture for people that are in this industry, and it's very diverse, lots of different people, and but there is this common stream amongst everybody, and I love being able to monitor that and watch it and understand it a little better. And then of course, Liz, just meeting somebody like you, what was it? There was a comment from, who was it? Oh yeah, from Venny, who said we need more of these stories of female founders in ed tech. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And so I feel honored that you were on the broadcast today. I'm sorry that we have to close it out now, but Liz, thank you, and hopefully we'll hear from you again. Maybe in the future, if I have anything going on, I will definitely hit you up and see if you might be
Wonderful.
interested in coming on and being a part of an event or something. And so with that, everybody have a great day. And thanks again. Friday, we do have another guest. And I can't remember her first name. I think it's Tristia Hennessy, more on the VR, AR side of things. So that one should be fascinating as well. And then also for anybody who attended the games and gamification event, I'm formatting all those videos now, so I'll have them on a website available soon for members to enjoy.